everybody. This is Karen Ranzi at Feel Fabulous with Food. I have some very interesting information for you today from a speaker who is going to talk with us about EMFs and our health. And this is Guy Vantresca. I'm so excited to have you here with me. I've had you come and speak to my vegan certification course and really learned so much from you. And I want to introduce Guy by reading a bit about him, his bio. Guy Vantresca spent 8 years during the Cold War as a U.S. Army officer in the U.S. and Germany. Having resigned as a captain, he joined the emerging computer industry in 1983, just as professional PCs started populating the office space. This was a time of heavy infrastructure building as traditional data processing became information technology and crossed over with the telecommunications industry, providing him a base knowledge of all communications technology, which became critical in understanding EMF exposure, the subject of 2 articles in his EMF health report. It was in 1991 in Washington, D.C., that Guy Vantresca became aware of the pervasiveness of man-made radiation in the environment and became concerned over the health effects. My question for you today is, why are EMFs, electromagnetic fields, so critical to human health in today's world?
Sure, Karen, thanks for the introduction. They're not just critical to human health. All biological health on the planet is reliant upon a healthy electromagnetic field. And the reason is because all life is electromagnetic in nature. It is certainly biochemical, and we've got plenty of studies and research showing the relationship we have with food and water and the biochemical process that occurs in the body to convert food into energy, how the energy is used and how the energy is stored. But one area that is lacking the research has been done in this new mysterious area I'm about to mention, but it's not general public knowledge. And that is the electromagnetic nature of life. And we are, I sing the body electric, that famous line from Walt Whitman. We are electric beings, electromagnetic beings. I'm going to read you a very quick introduction to a film which explains this very well. And this is in part 1, the first article that I've written. When life first arrived on this planet about 2 billion years ago, which was after the big splat, if you want to research the big splat, you can. Earth's surface was filled with the natural frequency. As biologically life slowly evolved, it did so surrounded by this frequency, and it began tuning in. By the time mankind arrived on the Earth, an incredible relationship had been struck, one that science is just beginning to comprehend. Research is showing that being exposed to this frequency is absolutely integral to us. It controls our mental and physical health. It synchronizes our circadian rhythms, and it aids our immune system and improves our sense of well-being. Not only are we surrounded by natural frequencies, our bodies are filled with them too. Our cells communicate using electromagnetic frequencies. Our brain emits a constant stream of frequency, and our DNA delivers instructions using those frequency waves. Without them, we couldn't exist for a second. So this delicate balance between life and the Earth took billions of years to perfect. But over the last, let's say, 30 years, humans have introduced a technology that has disturbed that balance, and it has disturbed it profoundly. To the naked eye, everything seems the same. But at a cellular level, this is the biggest change that life on Earth has endured. And these effects are just about to become perceptible to us, through our senses. We'll be able to sense these changes. And some people already have. So why is this important? Because we resonate. Just like we emotionally resonate, you know, I get a good vibe from this person or I get a bad vibe from that person. Unconsciously, we resonate electromagnetically with everything, with other people, with the environment around us, buildings, vehicles, homes, and also with the earth itself. So one of the tricky things is to understand that you have your own electromagnetic field all around you, and it extends out a certain distance. And when you meet someone, your field meets their field, and there's a handshake that goes on. That's called resonance. Resonance is when you connect to something else and you either accept it or reject it. You know, you almost have a fight or flight response to it. So that's why electromagnetic fields are so important. And now we have all these artificial fields. And these come from an incredible number of sources. Cell phones is the most visible culprit. Wi-Fi routers, GPS, other satellite communication, microwave ovens, anything that has a microchip in it. Now, almost every kitchen appliance has microwaves. Microchip technology embedded in it. Almost every vehicle. And the average modern automobile has 200 to 400 microchip processors in it. An airplane has 2,000 to 4,000. So our bodies are just not used to this. And then there's the electric grid in the home, which is full of dirty electricity. So now you're going to think, well, how are we going to survive without all this technology? Our lives, our conveniences, this wonderful life we've had is because of these technologies. Well, let me give you a historical perspective, right? This thing we call Western civilization started in ancient Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago in Sumer, which is where Iraq is today. They invented the wheel. They also had architecture, they had engineering, they had universities, medical schools and hospitals. They had a fully functioning society, and they did it with the wheel and a lot of slaves. They didn't have electricity. And if you look at the progress of Western civilization, I'm referring to not all civilizations, but Western, that started there. 6,000 years ago, we had the wheel, and it wasn't until the late 1700s that we had the Industrial Revolution. And once we did, the progress rapidly increased. We had the first Industrial Revolution with steam locomotion, with all the looms and weaves and fabrics that England and both New England became famous for. And then the second Industrial Revolution hit when we had very large machines through heavy steel manufacturing that could mass produce through assembly line manufacturing infinite number of things. Mostly it started with weaponry, which is one of the things I discovered in the military, is that almost every technological advance that humans have made starts with the purpose of war. And then after war, it trickles down to civilian use. So we go from the wheel 6,000 years ago, and it took us almost 6,000 years to get to the airplane. So in 1903, we get the airplane. 40 years after the airplane, we have the atomic bomb. which was dropped by an airplane. 10 years after the atomic bomb, DNA is discovered. And soon thereafter, human science starts mapping the DNA of everything, plants, animals, and eventually us. So by the late 90s, the human genome was fully mapped. And now we're in the 21st century where we have the internet is everywhere and it's not going away. And in fact, there'll be new internets and new webs built. Remember, the internet is the hard wire structure, and the web is the software that gives us our browsers and our email, which allows us, the web is the window into the internet. So both technologies are advancing, and there's going to be more and more generations of development. So why am I bringing this up? In 1991, I moved from Germany to Washington, D.C. Talk about a culture shock. From Berlin, one of the most advanced and wonderful cities in the world, 9 months out of the year. I go to Washington, D.C., which was John Kennedy's comment. It's a sleepy southern town with northern pretensions. So that was certainly true. It's different today, mostly because of government deficit spending. But I met a fellow who introduced me to the biological impact of all these artificial frequencies. This is back in 1991. There's no cell phone use to speak of, all right? And he introduced me to this report. So one of the good things that Richard Nixon did is he commissioned a telecommunications study to be done. He created actually a White House commission to study telecommunications and the impact on health. And in 1971, this commission produced a report. And I'm just going to read you from the executive summary, because this is incredibly shocking. This is from 1971. All right. Here we go. Oh yeah, the report was called Program for Control of Electromagnetic Pollution of the Environment, the Assessment of Biological Hazards of Non-Ionizing Electromagnetic Radiation. Okay, what is non-ionizing and what is ionizing? Well, you can go on the web and look up radiation. There's a chart that shows you radiation. So generally, medical science recognizes that ionizing radiation causes cancer. So that would be microwaves, radar, certain heavy machinery. And they always thought, well, if it's non-ionizing, you know, if it doesn't heat the flesh, it can't possibly cause any harm. Well, that's not true. And this is what, 50 years ago, this commission discovered that non-ionizing radiation does damage. And here's the report. This is from the executive summary. I'm only going to read this because I know there are people in the audience who say, that's not true. It can't possibly be. You know, why don't I know about it?
Well, so many people think that because you sometimes can't feel it or you don't know and you don't see it, that it's not there. And I've had people many times tell me that it's not science. I did not take the smart meter on my house, and people thought, you know, I'm crazy that I don't want a smart meter. I have to pay for my meter now every month to keep the original meter, but I'm okay with that. You know, I do believe that there's a lot of science behind this.
Sure. I mean, you made a decision to spend $10 a month to avoid getting cancer. So that's often what I tell people is how expensive. You know, when someone complains, all these vitamins and all this organic food, it's so expensive. What's the cost of an early premature death? And a painful one at that. Okay, here we go. So again, here's a report published in 1971. The electromagnetic radiation emanating from radar, television, communication systems, microwave ovens, industrial heat treatment systems, medical equipment, and many other sources permeate the modern environment, both civilian and military. Unless adequate monitoring controls based on a fundamental understanding of biological effects are instituted in the near future, then in the decades ahead, man may enter an era of energy pollution of the environment, comparable to the chemical pollution of today. The consequences of undervaluing or misjudging the biological effects of long-term, low-level exposure could become a critical problem for public health, especially if genetic effects are involved. This is 1971. There were no cell phones, there was no internet, there was no Wi-Fi. Satellites were strictly military or for use by commercial television stations. There were radio waves, that's about it. So how did they know this? It's because the military has been studying this for a long time. And this report used a lot of research done by the Navy, because the Navy has more radiation devices than anybody. And they don't want their sailors on their nuclear submarines and nuclear surface ships and all the, and there are stories in World War II where a sailor would accidentally walk in front of a radar screen when it was turned on and he'd just drop dead because these things are bad news. So, and the microwave oven, when it first, I remember when microwaves were made available, they were called radar ranges because it's the same technology.
I've read that you shouldn't even get within 30 feet of a microwave oven.
It's not how close you are when it's turned on, it's what it's doing to the food or liquid inside, because it's creating heat from the inside out, not the outside in, which is nature. Nature gives us convection method of cooking from the outside in. But when you agitate the atomic structure of something and you heat it from the inside out, you're going to be eating that, and your body is going to recognize and absorb that radiation, and it is going to damage the cellular structure. There was a group of hospitals that were discovering that babies were getting leukemia a month after being born, and they discovered these are babies who were not being breastfed, and they discovered that the mother's milk had been pumped and put in a refrigerator, and before given to the baby, it was put in the microwave. So the babies were drinking microwave mother's milk, and they were getting leukemia. So, folks, if you have a microwave, just use it as a glorified cabinet. Put your dishes in it. And
unplug it.
Yes, it shouldn't even be plugged in. But it is a Faraday cage, so I'm not sure if you're standing outside of it, you're probably not getting too much, but just don't use it. All right, so that's the background.
Can you tell us a bit more about some of the most common devices that people are using in their home, in their workplace? Even a lot of people have televisions in their bedrooms, smart TVs. How to set up your home, your work environment, so that you're not getting so bombarded by these EMFs, which are actually quite harmful to us, we're realizing.
Yes, that's true. So now that I've laid the groundwork, how are we exposed? And it's important for people to realize. So there's certainly outside of our homes, up in the sky, there's satellites, an alarming number of satellites. I mean, there used to be 1,500, now there's over 30,000. And if Starlink goes up to its full capacity, and then the competing satellite next, we're going to have over 60,000 satellites orbiting the Earth, and every single square inch or square meter of land and water surface will be blanketed by a satellite, giving internet access, wireless internet access to you, no matter where you are.
I remember you said that that you could be like on a sailboat um, near an island somewhere in anywhere,
Yeah,
some area far away from everything, and you could still get internet because of the satellites.
sure. And there are sat phones, there are satellite phones. They're very expensive, but that does it too. But I would much rather have a satellite phone that I can turn on and off and keep it far away from my body than be blanketed 24/7 by a satellite wireless internet signal that I don't need, because then you don't have a choice. Okay, let's bring up Wi-Fi. Let's bring up internet. So Karen, when I visited you at your home last time, I helped you set up a wired connection to your computer, so
And
that you
I'm so
don't have to.
excited to have my new Ethernet cable and that you came over and that you knew how to plug it in where I wasn't sure. So that was
Right. And so most people, they if you live in the modern world, modern life, you're used to the internet. I'm not saying you can't live without it. Of course you can, but you get used to it. So how do most people access the internet? Well, it turns out it's wirelessly. And I would say you're going to have to make adjustments. You know, human beings adapt a technology when it's introduced to them, and they accept it, they embrace it, and they just jump into it without thinking of the consequences, because they're being sold on the convenience. Like, oh, why cook a meal for 20 minutes in the oven when you can nuke it for 2.5 minutes in a microwave? Isn't that convenient? Well, there's a price to pay. You're going to get cancer. You're not, it's not absolute that you're going to get cancer, but it's it's pretty clear that the possibility of cancer is going to come a lot quicker if you use a microwave all the time. Well, it turns out the same is true with all these Wi-Fi signals that we're getting from routers that we have in our homes. And even if you don't have a home, like I don't have a Wi-Fi in my apartment. I mean, I have it when I need it for certain things, but I turn it off and on all the time. But in my apartment, it's all hardwired, Ethernet cables. But I live in a walk-up building in New York City where there are 30 apartments. I can guarantee you
Aren't you
there's
exposed from the other apartments?
I'm very close. But at least this building is rather, it's 120 years old, so it's a solid brick and concrete building. So that absorbs. But I have 29 neighbors and they all have Wi-Fi routers. I can see them when I turn on my computer. I can't go knocking on their doors. Hey, you got to install an Ethernet cable because it's affecting my health. Can't do that. It's like trying to convince your friends not to get the so-called COVID vaccine. We know how much trouble that causes. So, you notice what I called it, the so-called vaccine, because it's not a vaccine. All right. So you've got Wi-Fi. Then you have the cell phones. So we have a massive cell phone network all around the world. And it started in the 1980s with what they call 1G technology. Actually, there was a 0G, but I won't go into that. But 1G was the brick-sized mobile phone that you saw Michael Douglas carry in the movie Wall Street, the first Wall Street movie. Then in the mid 90s, we got 2G, and 2G allowed texting and calling, and the phone was much smaller. And that's like the Motorola StarTAC. If anyone remembers the StarTAC, it was like a Star Trek looking phone that was pretty cool. I had one. And by the way, I'm guilty of being enamored and sort of seduced by these new technological toys, because I'm a tinkerer, so I sort of like these things, but I'm very aware of the dangers involved in them. So then 3G came along after 2000, and that allowed basic internet browsing and email along with texting and calling. And then 4G came, don't quote me, but let's just say 2010. And 4G allowed much faster internet browsing, email, and full functioning smartphones. And you could then get apps which you could download and make your functioning so much easier. And now we have 4G LTE. Sorry, I forgot what LTE means, but it's an enhancement of the original 4G, and it's quite fast. Fast enough so that if you don't have internet access wherever you are in a hotel, let's say, you can use your cell phone signal as to bring the internet into your phone and turn the phone into a hotspot. So the phone becomes a Wi-Fi router, and then you can connect 4 or 5 devices to your phone while you're talking and texting and doing all your other stuff. That's phenomenal technology, right? Pretty cool. But you're radiating the entire living space. So I'd say the two most visible culprits in this scenario are the cell phone or the mobile phone and the Wi-Fi routers. And some additional ones we discussed, smart meters. These are electric and gas meters, which are no longer analog, digital, but they're not just digital. They transmit and receive signals. They're pulsing, what, once every 2 seconds or once every second, I forgot. But some ridiculously over the top amount of time, they're constantly sending your usage into the cell phone network to be picked up by your local utility so that they can monitor your usage and charge you more accurately. Of course, that's what they're telling you. What they're really doing is collecting data on your life. And eventually there's going to be a smart home. A smart home is where anything that's plugged in has microchips and transmitters and receivers. It'll be not just your TV and your stereo system and your phone and your telephone and your computer, it'll be every appliance you use. And all that data will be collected because now we have this thing called AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, and machine learning. So there is a technological agenda afoot. I won't go into it now, but it's about data. It's about reducing you from a vibrant, divine human being into merely a set of inputs and outputs. Digital, like your whole life is going to be reduced to zeros and ones that can be measured, and that the whole purpose of your living is to feed the machine. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, watch the first Matrix movie, the first one. It explains it really well, and it's accurate. We are living in the Matrix. I've just described to you the challenge. I've told you its pervasiveness. Now, what are you going to do about it? You actually have a tremendous amount of control. There are 3 strategies here. Avoidance. Avoidance is number 1. So you want to reduce your exposure to electromagnetic fields through avoidance. Then you want to do shielding. You want to protect physically your environment so that the signals don't penetrate. And third, you can remediate. Now, shielding is very expensive. That involves putting certain paint on all your walls. You shield the windows. You almost create a Faraday cage in your home so that nothing gets in and nothing goes out, and that the only signal is through a cable.
I have known some people who have had to go to that level because they have already started having a lot of symptoms.
Yeah. Well, they could actually just move to the country.
Yeah. And I know
And
some people who quit their jobs in the city and they moved far out into the country.
yeah, I mean, that would be under the avoidance rubric. So one of the ways to avoid it is to go back to the rural life, which is where we came from. And a lot of people are leaving cities. But shielding is very expensive. And also, what if you travel? What if you move? What if you can't take your house with you? So I believe very strongly in remediation because remediation covers you every time you go out the door, even if it's a 15-minute shopping trip, or if you go on a trip. If you leave your home in your town, you go overseas, you travel around the U.S., you need protection in your home and outside of your home. So I think shielding, I definitely agree with. And Dr. Joseph Mercola, He just wrote a new book on EMF. It's excellent, but it goes into a lot of detail. He's a champion of shielding. So if you want to do that, follow him and spend a ton of money and shield your home. But I've come up with devices which what they do is they work at the same level as the technology does to, here, let me put it this way. We know that that electromagnetic frequencies are natural and that there are artificial ones. And the natural ones bolster and support your life, where the artificial ones drain your energy. And the reason is because the engineers who designed this technology, they're not biologists. They don't know anything about health. And more to the point, they're not being paid to create healthy electromagnetic wireless technology. They're getting paid to deliver zeros and ones the fastest way possible, the furthest distances, and that's all they care about. But if they really were holistic engineers, they would understand that they could actually put healthy frequencies into that technology so that it would support life the way the earth does. Biomimicry, you've heard of the term biomimicry. Our entire civilization, the way we do everything, must transform into a biomimicry concept if we're going to survive on this planet. Because if we continue driving technology and heavy industry using petroleum and carbon, not just petroleum and carbon, but just the way we expand and conquest the earth, all that's got to change. We've got to get back into harmony with the planet on many levels. So I'm just talking about that electromagnetic level, but it exists up and down the whole spectrum. Yeah, frankly, it doesn't take a deep thinker to see the danger we're in. Okay, so in my EMF health report, which you're going to provide people, I have recommended some devices, and sometimes you need 2 or 3 of them. One is not enough, but they take, one of them acts like an electricity filter. So you need a water filter, you need an air filter, you also need an electricity filter. So there's a way of cleaning the electric grid behind the walls, and there's also a way of cleaning the electromagnetic fields in your home or in your work, so that they go through a filter and they come out clean the other side. That's one device that's called the Total Shield. And then there's a device that helps with the wiring inside the walls, and that comes from a company called SATIC, SATIC. I'll be sending you that info as well. And then there's another device called Blue Shield, which, again, earlier I talked about how the natural frequencies of the earth resonate with us and all biological life because we come from the earth. And so there's an electrical engineer in New Zealand who understood that principle, and he discovered those frequencies and he put them into a machine, and this machine broadcasts the life-affirming, healthy frequencies that are missing from artificial technologies, so that your body can resonate with the good, healthy frequencies rather than resonating with the others. So it's not stopping the Wi-Fi, the cordless phone, the cell phone, the satellite. It's just resonating with your body first, so you get a healthy handshake while this storm of destructive crap is flying around you. So you need
a bit of protection even if you're using them.
Yes, yes. Now, does that mean, oh, if I use all these devices, Guy says, I can still hold the cell phone to my head? No, no. You still got to practice the avoidance tactic or strategy. So you got avoidance, you got shielding, you got mitigation. or remediation. Remediation is probably a better word. You still have to avoid. So don't hold the phone in your hand all the time. Get one of those sticks, those photo sticks that you see tourists walking around taking pictures of everything. You can also get other ways. You can get cases to put around your phone that shield. You can get
There's a case called the Cruz, CRUZ, that's supposed to be very effective.
yeah,
Cruz.
I don't know if that's from Dr. Tom Cruise in California or not. Sorry, he's not. He left California. I haven't looked at that one. There's safe sleeve is one that's pretty good, but I'll look at the new one, Cruise. There's so much stuff on the market today. It's hard to evaluate all of it. And by the way, you can't evaluate it with a meter because there's no meter that can measure the biological impact of artificial radiation. There's only two ways I know of, and that's kinesiology and dowsing. Dowsing is using a pendulum, and kinesiology is muscle testing, because that's how we know when your body is reacting to artificial frequencies. So so let me see. Yeah, what are some of the other avoidance things? Always use a headset when you're talking on your phone, and get a headset that has an air tube in between the phone and the earbuds.
What about just using the speaker?
Yeah, of course, use the speaker. But sometimes you can't use a speaker because you're in public, so you get these headphones. Never use AirPods. You got to remember, anything that's wireless, whether it's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, if it's wireless, it's sending and receiving a wireless electromagnetic field or frequency, or it's using microwave radiation to send information back and forth, and it's going through the air all around you. So nothing wireless.
Okay. That's really
Yeah,
good information.
yeah. In my report, I go into a lot more detail, but that's the idea behind it.
Well, I'll definitely include a link to the
Right.
report. Yeah, that's, so many people just don't realize that this has a negative effect. And then, like, when you're not feeling well, you can't. I've worked with clients who have had severe headaches and they didn't realize it was coming from the EMF devices that they were using. And so they've had to make changes, and they've seen positive effects from those changes that you're talking about. Thank you so much. And
I
especially your experience working in the military, and what you experienced there, and your work with radiation devices.
Yeah, I mean, they were in these. The Army has a series of electronic warfare weapons that I was just being exposed to when I was in the service. They've since become far more sophisticated, but they can roll a Jeep or a truck into a city, turn on this what looks like a small satellite dish, and they can disperse a crowd in about 10 seconds. Yeah, these are microwave radiation. They're weapons. They're called electronic warfare weaponry. You can look it up. The user manuals for some of these weapons are online. So yeah, the military and the intelligence agencies learned that they can use electromagnetism as a mind control device. And this is not woo woo, okay? This is serious research. So the original mind control programs that the CIA engaged in, like MK Ultra, used LSD and torture, various types of torture and sensory deprivation to turn you into a robot. Well, now they can do it. They don't have to go to that extent, like in the Jason Bourne movies that they talk about that a lot, and in the Bourne books. But today they can just roll up with a Jeep or a truck, turn on this thing, and they can get total strangers to start beating the crap out of each other in the street, or the opposite, become extremely passive, docile little sheep and go about their lives. Well, guess what? They're doing it. You don't need an army weapon to roll up to your block. they're using the cell phone network to do that.
Yeah. Wow. This is a lot to take in. So I'm hoping that everybody is listening and will start to do some of this research on your own. Yeah. Thank you, Guy, for opening us up to a lot of this. Some of us were really aware, but now we're very aware.
Yeah,
Um,
and I realized at the end I used the they. They are trying to do this to us. I know it sounds far-fetched, but whether it's conscious or not, the damage is there. So it doesn't matter if they're trying to control the human race or if they're just implementing technology for corporate profit and they don't even know what they're doing. It doesn't matter. The the effect is still going to hit you, and you're responsible for your life. And when you put your well-being in the hands of a government or a public health official, you're surrendering your sovereignty. Don't do that. Be your own master.
yes.
Mastery is critical. You're a divine being. You're a God on earth. So behave like that.
Yes. Thank
Right?
you. That's a wonderful way to end. And so everybody listen up to this valuable information. And thank you, Guy Vantresca, so much for joining us today about EMFs and your health.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Karen.